Tonight, I'm going to peel back the layers of America's greatest crisis. It's not inflation, it's not politics, it's not even foreign wars. It's a crisis that is killing our children, our flesh, our blood. It's a subject very close to my home and our hearts. It's turning our streets into asylums, and it is brainwashing a generation into madness. On August 27th, 4 days ago, at a Catholic church in Minneapolis, there were children there that were having Mass. A young boy who thought he was a girl walked in with a rifle. By the time it was over, children lay dead. Parents wept over coffins, and a sanctuary was turned into a slaughterhouse. Now, I'd like for you to look at your screen. Uvalde, Denver, Georgia, Nashville, Colorado, Aberdeen, Minnesota, Iowa, school shootings, every single one transgendered. And you have to wonder how a nation is so bewitched that we look at this and don't see a problem or a pattern. Before this young, confused man pulled the trigger on August the 27th, he left behind these words: I am tired of being trans. I wish I never would have brainwashed myself. That was his last words. I'll repeat it. I'm tired of being confused. I wish I had never brainwashed myself. Do you hear the torment in that? That's not freedom. What I'm hearing from that young man, it's not freedom. That's not pride. That's not authenticity. That's regret. That's bondage. That's despair. Our nation is raising an entire generation that will one day look back and whisper those same words. I wish I had never brainwashed myself. I wish I had never brainwashed myself. That's the title of tonight's monologue. I wish I had never brainwashed myself. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have a pattern, and what we're developing is a law. Do you know how all great laws are established? The law of physics, the law of gravity. Sorry to my flat earth friends. Newton's law. Do you know how these laws were discovered? The law of circularity. They were discovered by repeating patterns. It's the foundation of science. When you begin to find a pattern, pay attention, you're finding a law that never changes. I beg anyone to look at the pattern on your screen and tell me if we do not have scientific evidence that transgenderism is not freedom. We have witnesses that are establishing a pattern. Now, what I want to point out to you tonight, this pattern is old. The Bible says in Romans 1:28 that Yahweh, God, gave them over to a reprobate way of thinking or a reprobate mind. Do you know what reprobate is? Rebellious. That's it. A rebellious way of thinking. Now, I have told many people, and I'm going to tell you tonight, there is no such thing as homosexuality or lesbianism or transgenderism. Those are brands that we place on an old word. The old word is called rebellion. But we rebrand it as gay. No, remove that title. It's rebellion to the law of God. What we're dealing with in our world today is not new. It's very old. But what is new is our inability to stop it. Society has stopped this nonsense for centuries. It stayed in back rooms, hidden in closets where it belongs. It was never allowed in open society. Do you know why? Because we always knew it was happening, but we always knew there was a shame on it, and therefore we could control society from this rebellion that is now grown to such a level that the shooter in Minnesota said these words: I was reprobate minded. Something happened to my thinking. And I'm going to tell you what happened to his thinking. You may not like it. What happened to his thinking was a society that did not break that rebellion in him, but affirmed it, congratulated it, and wrapped our arms around it and helped. We talk about grooming. You know, that's the new word now. We talk about grooming, child molesters grooming children. Darling, we have groomed an entire generation while we talk about grooming. Pastor Vaughn, I didn't groom them. Did you open your mouth to tell them they were in rebellion and that they would never be accepted in the eyes of God that way? Did you tell them? Then you groomed them. You can get off now. I don't care. You're going to hear the truth tonight. Brainwashing that this man talks about did not start in that school shooting. It started in the mind. A mind that from childhood is inclined to reprobation. You see, I disagree with the Christian church. When the Christian church says that people are not born gay, I don't believe that. I believe absolutely fallen man is born in sin. And I believe every human on the face of the earth is born with certain tendencies, proclivities, temptations. Some people are born as kleptomaniacs, someone that has to steal. No matter what, they could be the richest person in the world, they have to steal. They were born with a fallen nature that was inclined in their mind to that way of thinking. You have others that may be raised by women instead of tough men, and they become feminized. And we tell them that's because they're gay. It's because somebody was too busy to whip the press out of that child. Oh, I don't care if you like it or not. We are all born with proclivities of sin. Some in this way, some for alcohol, some for drugs. But let's take all the titles away from it and bring it down to one word. We can come back to a reprobate mind or a rebellious mind. When does a rebellious mind become reprobate? When the rebellious mind sees nothing wrong with the rebellion. That's when you're reprobate. Some people sin and they know they've sinned. You're not reprobate. If there's a repentance left in you, you're not reprobate. If there's an, oh God, I'm sorry in you, there's no reprobate in you. But when rebellion agrees with rebellion, you have entered into a brainwashed, reprobate mind. From that root comes every other sin and eventually mental collapse. At the root of every mental collapse is rebellion against Yahweh's law. The Bible tells us in Jeremiah 17:9, the mind of a man is deceitful above everything else and desperately wicked. Did you know the Bible said that about your mind? It's wicked, it's rebellious, it's deceitful. I'll tell you how deceitful your mind is. Are you ready? I hope you're listening tonight. Your mind is so deceitful that you think everybody else except you is a narcissist. That is narcissism. We have these new titles, these new names that we love to throw out. We've got a title from a psychologist for everybody you don't like. The only one without a title is you, because your mind is desperately wicked. You can never see yourself as wrong. What does that lead to? A reprobate mind. Many of you watching me tonight need to quit worrying about who's a narcissist and who is a this or a that, and find out what you are. Because mental failure begins when we do not examine our mind by the word of Yahweh. Now, what happens if that rebellion is left unchecked? When I was a little boy in Bude, Mississippi, Franklin County, my foster mother raised me in that little bitty town. My foster mother was a God-fearing woman, Kathleen Temple and Jewel Temple. May God rest their souls. They took me in their homes when I was a baby. One day we were at a grocery store, and every time I go to Bude, I'll show anybody riding with me that grocery store. I went in that grocery store with Mama Temple. That's what I called her. And I saw a chocolate bunny rabbit that I desperately wanted. I was probably 5, 6 years old, somewhere in there. And I wanted that bunny rabbit so, so, so bad. Mama Temple said I couldn't have it. As soon as she went down the other aisle, I grabbed that bunny rabbit and ran out to the car. I knew she wouldn't find me because she was shopping. I ate that bunny rabbit. When she was finished shopping, the grocery store manager must have seen me take the rabbit. And here come Mama Temple with tears in her eyes. I was her little baby. She didn't have any children. She was in her 70s. I was her only little baby, and I had stole a bunny rabbit. I'll never forget that day. That little root of rebellion in my mind as a child was not left unchecked. She brought so much shame on me. I had to go back in the store. We had to bring the money in for that bunny rabbit, money she did not have. She was not wealthy at all. I'll never forget that day. And it placed something in that rebellious child's mind that said, no. Now, years later, when I left her care, I was thrown from pillar to post. One day I'll write my story after some of my loved ones pass away. But I lived from here to there, and no one put a check on my rebellion. And I began to get by with this and get by with that because no one had authority over me. They loved me and they just coddled me. Eventually, as I got older and older and older, something in that rebellious mind was unchecked. Many of you watching know my story. You know what happened to me 20 years ago. I paid a dear price, still paying it today, for that rebellion that turned into a reprobate mind. When you leave rebellion unchecked, our children begin to develop a reprobate mind. Psychologists call the fruit of unchecked rebellion cluster B personality traits. And I'm going to go through those 4 personality traits that develop when you are not checking rebellion. The first one is narcissism. It is the favorite of everybody's. Narcissism is an inflated sense of self-importance, entitlement, arrogance, and exploitation of others. The narcissist cannot see beyond the mirror. Narcissism, my friend, get rid of the word, Mr. Psychologist. I've come to tell you, Mr. Psychologist, you haven't discovered anything. Narcissism. No, 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 no. Let me bring you back to an old book, especially 2 Timothy 3 and 2. It says, know this, in the last days, perilous times will come, and men will love their own selves, and they will be prideful and boasters, and they will want what everybody else has. They will love themselves. Mr. Psychologist, that's a pretty new name that you've come up with, narcissism. The Bible calls it a reprobate. We don't want to call it a reprobate mind because then we find spiritual roots and nobody knows how to deal with those. We cannot help the mentally challenged because of our cute little word, narcissism. If you'll put your face in the altar of God, you will not have narcissism. You will kill your pride. You will kill putting yourself before everyone else. Narcissism dies where Christ lives. It's that simple. You don't need medicine for that. You need mercy. You need, brothers and sisters, the problem we're facing in America is not mental. It is rebellion, and that is spiritual. It's the selfie generation. My truth. Do you hear that word? If you want to ever hear narcissism, listen for the word, that's my truth. You don't have a truth. Get over yourself. And then the next word that shows the reprobate mind is these words. That's my rights. You have no rights except the ones given to you by your Creator. And that's a right to obey Him and to walk in His way. And ladies and gentlemen, that's where this phrase comes from. I have a right to love who I want to love. No, you do not. No, you cannot rebrand rebellion and call it identity. The shooter said, I wished I never would have brainwashed myself. Or in other words, I wished I didn't have had a reprobate mind. Because that was the bitter harvest of a narcissistic culture that taught him, follow yourself, affirm yourself, worship yourself. You have a right to love. No, you have a right to look out for society, not just yourself. To create a godly family of a father and a mother and children. To obey God, that's your right. And to reap the rewards of that. Not to pull a trigger and say, why did I do this to myself? Why was I brainwashed? He said, I'm tired of being trans. Do you know why he was trans? Somebody from our generation told him it was okay. He had a right. The second personality trait is borderline. It's a personality disorder marked by instability, intense emotion, fear of abandonment, violent outburst, love turning to hate overnight. That's not new. That's called Cain and Abel. Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, suddenly and killed him. We don't have a new mental health crisis in America. What we have is a new mental health avoidance of the root in America. We've shut the church down. We mock the preachers. We make fun of the leadership of God's churches. We teach our children they don't need God. They don't need the church. Find their own way. Cain found his own way. This shooter in Minnesota found his own way and then turned to our generation and said, why was I brainwashed? Because we let you be, because we love you and we want you to feel accepted. The third trait, according to psychology, is antisocial lawlessness, sociopathy, disregard for law, for human life, no conscience. Brothers and sisters, you can go back to Judges 21 and 25 and find antisocial personality disorder, rebellion, lawlessness unchecked, the breakdown of institution, the breakdown of order, no restraint. That's why we see homeless camps, violent villages, jails overflowing, young men live streaming their murders for likes. It's the fruit of a generation that we raised. The fourth trait, histrionic chaos, is a personality disorder that loves drama, manipulation, desperate for attention, craving control. Everything is theater, crying all the time. Ooh, anything for drama, anything to bring the attention to themselves. My friend, that's not new. In 2 Kings 9 and 30, Jezebel painted her face and teared her hair and looked out of a window. She put on her paint and drew attention to herself. She was a manipulator, a seducer, an attention seeker, a destroyer. She lived in performance. She weaponized drama. And that's where gender ideology came from. Histrionic personality disorder, drama, boys dressing as girls, drag queens. Is Jezebel drama? It's a personality disorder. No, it's rebellion. Girls dressing like boys, Don't you know that is histrionic personality, histrionic chaos, it's called? Parades for pride and perversion. They don't want affirmation, they want your attention. Painted faces, performance, chaos everywhere. But behind that makeup, despair. Behind the drama, emptiness. Behind that show, regret. Words like, why did I allow myself to be brainwashed? I wish I would never have been brainwashed. I don't know about you tonight, but those words from that mama's boy grabbed me. It was a cry for a generation. Why did I brainwash myself? I'll tell you why, son. Someone let you do it. A weak generation let you do it. They were too scared to tell you you were a rebel against God. They were afraid they would offend you. They were afraid you wouldn't feel loved. Narcissism says, I love myself. Borderline rage says, I'll kill my brother. Antisocial lawlessness said, I'll live by my own rules. Histrionic chaos says, I'll perform my rebellion with a painted face. I will get your attention. But every one of them ends with, I wish I never would have brainwashed myself. That is what unchecked rebellion turns into. And when our society applauds it, affirms it, and celebrates it, we wind up with children pulling a trigger saying, why am I doing this? How did this happen to me? The Bible tells us they will exchange the truth for a lie. That's what brainwashing is. The shooter testified to the truth of that scripture when he said, I wished I never would have brainwashed myself. He's telling you, he bought a lie instead of truth because he's living in a church world with creatures instead of preachers. He's living in a church world with a pastor run by instead of driven by a passion for truth. I look at this generation and I ask myself, where was all of this insanity when I was a child? This is what I want to talk to you about. When I was a young person, I don't remember seeing many crazy people at all. There was no homeless camps on the streets, under the bridges, by the hundreds. We didn't see that in the world I grew up in. There was no lunacy. And we all had that one crazy aunt, but that's it. I couldn't figure this out until yesterday. Yesterday, your president said something that got me to thinking. He said that he was floating the idea of reopening insane asylums for the mental. Something triggered in my mind. And I went to researching. Let me tell you what I found. Let's rewind to the 20th century. Let's go back 100 years. America dealt with mental illness through institutions. We call them asylums, but they were institutions. Were they perfect? No. Some were overcrowded. Some were cruel. Investigations uncovered abuse. But here's the truth that they won't say out loud, but I will. For all of their flaws, and they had flaws, those asylums, those institutions provided something that our society desperately lacks today. One word: restraint. The violent, the mentally insane were not free to terrorize the streets. They were not free to go in churches and torment the members. They were not free to scare their family. They were not free to cause society to suffer for their choices and rebellion. They were not free to inflict upon others what they were suffering. Families, even though they would grieve and cry, at least they had somewhere to bring their son or their daughter who was dangerous to themselves and society. Then came the 1960s, the 1970s, my generation. A wave of idealism swept across our nation. You know how today we hear defund the police? It's such a beautiful idea. We don't need no more police, you know? Well, in the 60s and 70s, politicians said we can do better than the insane asylum. We're going to build community centers, not institutions. It sounds noble, doesn't it? The problem is the funding never came. The centers never materialized. The doors of the asylum slammed shut, and patients were released by the hundreds of thousands into our society. Where did they go? Did they disappear? No. And now we threw the baby out with the bathwater, did we not? And 50 years later, we're still living with the ever growing consequences. Let me teach you the numbers real quick. I want to take you to 1955. Okay. There were 558,000 people in public institutions. Did you hear that number? Over 500,000 people were institutionalized. You remember I told you a while ago, I don't ever remember seeing any craziness as a child like that. Why not? They were restrained. They were not in public view. 558,000 people in America in psychiatric hospitals. There were 340 beds per 100,000 people. Experts say we need 60 beds per 100,000 people. Back then, we had 340 beds per 100,000 people. Let's fast forward to 2023, 2 years ago. That number that I just quoted you collapsed by 94%. We went from 558,000 people getting psychiatric help to 36,000 patients nationwide. 36,000. That is 10 beds per 100,000 people. We cut capacity nearly 100% in this nation. And what happened? Homelessness exploded. Emergency rooms overflowing. Prisons became the new asylums. Do you know that in 1880, less than 1% of the inmates had mental illness? Today, 25% of our prisons is mental illness. We did not cure insanity when we shut down the flawed institution. We shifted it. We shut the hospitals and filled the streets and the prisons, and precious elderly people and families have to sit in their homes scared to death of their own mentally incapable family members. We traded psychiatric beds for jail cells. Hello, government. You're still paying for the institutions. Open them back up. Do you know why? Jails make money. Did you know that the prison system is not owned by our government? most of them, except for the federal ones, are individually owned by somebody sitting at home making $50 a day per inmate that costs them $8 a day to feed. It's a beautiful financial situation. The government doesn't have to build all these prisons. They just pay $50 a day or whatever per, and then the people, they're lobbying. These people that own these prisons are lobbying to Congress not to open these institutions, because then the state has to pay for that. You're already paying for it, government. You're paying it. The private prisons. Oh, I get it. You're getting a kickback. I see. So when this shooter said, I wished I never brainwashed myself, remember, we and this government cut off every road that might have led him to treatment. We had no place to restrain him until that brainwashing left his mind. No institution is perfect. The priesthood is not perfect. The monarchy is not perfect. The courts are not perfect. But Yahweh ordained them all because order, even when it's flawed, is better than chaos. Institutions restrain rebellion. They don't redeem it, they restrain it. They keep rebellion from devouring the innocent. When we abandon the institutions, we abandoned the restraint, and rebellion grew wild. As a pastor, I have seen the police come before to those that were having mental issues and basically said, so sorry, where do we bring them? My grandmother had more sense than all of Washington, D.C., and all of the American Psychological Association put together. She had for these boys that might have thought they were girls or girls that wanted to marry girls. She had a solution. It was simple: discipline, truth, and faith. Those three things cured your little wild ideas. My grandmother said, fix the twig before it becomes a tree. That meant chores before play, church before fun, respect before freedom. If you lied, you were corrected. If you rebelled, you were disciplined. And you know what that did? It killed narcissism before it sprouted. But today, what do? We affirm rebellion. We give pronouns to it. We put flags up to honor it. We call sin an identity. And then we act shocked when the shooter says, I wish I never would have brainwashed myself. Sir, you didn't. That falls on us. Finally, if you want to know how to overcome rebellion, it's very simple. It's rights versus duty. Our culture screams, I have the right to love who I want to. I have the right to be who I think I am. But rights without duties is narcissism. Luke 17:10 says, we have done that which was our duty to do. When you have a duty to Yahweh and his word, it doesn't matter what you have a right to. If his word says it's wrong, narcissism will not let you commit to duty. It makes you submit to your rights. But when you know your duty, that's why the Queen of England was so beloved. She put her duty before even her family, before even her own pleasure, her duty to her nation. What we're missing in America today in this mental health crisis that starts from the very earliest of childhood. I'm not talking about mental slackness, for lack of a better word. That's a sickness. That has to do with neurons and chemicals. That's not what I'm talking about tonight. I'm talking about a mental condition like this boy that thought he was a girl that started with a little rebellion. When you find your duty is to Yahweh, you will lay down your own desire for your duty to your family. You have a right to sleep with whoever you want to sleep with, but you have a duty not to. You have a right, if you're a woman, to marry another woman, but you have a duty to society. Besides God and besides your family, you have a duty to society. What is that duty? To raise up children in the fear of God and to raise them up knowing the only true family that exists, a father, a mother, and you have a duty to the larger society to not put confusion in the children's faces. If you want to practice your rights, go do it in a closet. But you practice your duty to society in public. If you practice your duty to God, you won't even do it there. Even Yeshua had to pray this prayer, not my will, but thine be done. He had a right to his will. You have a right to your pleasure, but you have a duty to your God, your family, and society. And when you embrace that duty, you drop narcissism. It leaves your life. The shooter lived for himself, even though he looked around society and saw this wasn't right. Somebody told him it was, and he lived for himself and collapsed in regret. That's not love. That's rebellion disguised as romance and identity. It says, society be danged, family be danged, Yahweh be danged. That is a reprobate mind. There's a cure for it: duty. Slavery to self is not freedom. Duty is freedom. The cure for narcissism, the cure for all of these personalities, it's not more rights, it's not more self-esteem, it's duty. Love Yahweh with all your heart. That's your first duty. If you're listening to me tonight, you're struggling with homosexuality. You're struggling with lesbianism. Look in my eyes. God loves you. I love you. His church loves you. We love you so much that we will tell you this is not God's plan for your life. And we will encourage you, overcome yourself and submit to your duty, to your God. Obey his commandments. And the more you do it, the more that self-desire will die. The more that self-pleasure will die as your duty to family, your duty to Yahweh, your duty to the church, your duty to society, as it increases, narcissism, it all dies. Why? Because you're laying aside a reprobate mind. The Bible said, husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. There's no way a wife can love a wife or a husband can love a husband. It's forbidden. And if nobody's ever told you that, you just heard love. I didn't say you're evil or horrible. I said you're suffering from love of self more than love of God, more than love of family, more than love of society. The Bible said, render to Caesar what's Caesar's. If a person doesn't pay their taxes, what does that mean? That's narcissism. You're living for yourself instead of your society at large. The Bible said, give what you owe to help society function. Duty will discipline desire. Duty kills narcissism. Duty restrains rebellion. Duty tempers love. If you say, I love this person of the same sex, okay, I don't deny that. Do you know why you love them? It's not because of sexual attraction. You know why you love them? You spent too much time with them. Listen to me. There's no way you can fall in love with anybody that you're not spending time with. If you want to overcome that, you cut the time that you're spending with that love of self and focus on duty. Duty to society, to a nuclear family, to be part of a whole. We're told in the Bible about strong delusions in the last days. We're living in it. Boys living as girls, girls believing they're boys, a whole society brainwashing itself into madness. I wished I had never been brainwashed. That is the sound of rebellion, reaping regret. Thank you for staying with me tonight. I know this was heavy, but truth is heavy. That shooter said, I wished somebody would have stopped me. I wish somebody would have truly washed my brain. I'm tired of being trans. And yet you have a parade for me, but I'm tired of it. May America say the same thing before it's too late, that we're tired of being brainwashed, exchanging the truth of God's word for a lie. So until next time, keep your duty to Yahweh. Keep your duty to your family. Keep your duty to society. And remember, truth will always outlive a lie. Good night, America. Thank you for watching.